Question 1. The Earth's resources are being depleted much too fast. To correct this, the US must keep its resource consumption at present levels for many years to come. Which of the following, if true, must more strengthen the argument above? So here we are making two statements. The first statement is talking about the high rate of depletion of Earth's resources. And the second statement is saying that to correct this imbalance, the US should keep its resource consumption at present levels, should not increase its resource consumption. Now, the first thing that you should ask yourself when you're asked to strengthen this argument is the relationship between statement 1 and statement 2. Statement 1 is talking about global resources, right? The fact that global resources are depleting way too fast. And statement 2 is presenting a solution that focuses on the United States. It says that to correct this global depletion of resources, the US must put a cap on the amount of resources that it consumes. So the first thing that you should think when you are asked to strengthen this is to provide a link between global resource depletion and US resource consumption, because clearly that is what the author is trying to say. That's the connection the author is trying to make. Option A, new resource deposits are constantly being discovered. Option B, the US consumes 1/3 of all resources used in the world. Option C, other countries need economic development more than the US does. And option D, other countries have agreed to hold their resource consumption at present levels. Now, looking at the argument made in the passage, the best answer would be option B. Because if the United States indeed consumes 1/3 of the resources used in the world, then to check the decline of global resources, the US must do something drastic to its own resource consumption, because its share in that global pool is a high value of 1/3. So this is a direct connect which strengthens the claim that has been made in the text. Option A, new resource deposits are constantly being discovered. If you think about it, this actually kind of weakens that claim, because if new resource deposits are being discovered, then there is no reason for the United States to keep its resource consumption in check. So it's not A. Other countries need economic development more than the US does. Good, true. The requirement for other countries to develop is perhaps more than what the US faces, considering it's already a developed country. But this does not address the relationship between global resource depletion and the author's suggestion that the US keep its resource consumption in check. So this is not strengthening that claim. Option D, other countries have agreed to hold their resource consumption at present levels. This also does not strengthen the claim made in the text, because we are interested in the relationship between US resource consumption and global resource declining. So there is no point talking about what other countries are doing, because that doesn't address the point in the text. So the right answer for this is option B. For all of these questions, it would be a good idea to pause the video and try the question on your own. And when you feel you have an answer, unpause the video and see if you got it right. Question 2. The most serious flaw in television's coverage of election campaigns is its tendency to focus on the horse race side of politics, that is, to concentrate on the question who is winning at the expense of substantive coverage of the issues and the candidates' positions on them. In particular, the obsession with opinion polls has surrounded elections with the atmosphere of a football game or a prize fight. To reform the situation, a first step might well be, and then we have to logically complete the text. So what is being claimed in the text? We are saying that there is a major flaw in how elections are covered by television. And the flaw is that there's too much focus on who is winning the election and very little focus on issues that should be covered during the election and what the different candidates who are standing for election think about those issues. So there's too much focus on who might be the victor and not so much on the issues surrounding the election. And then the author claims that the obsession with opinion polls has surrounded elections with the atmosphere of a prize fight. So instead of focusing on issues, television coverage focuses too much on opinion polls, which tell you what or who is going to win a particular election, and that gives you the impression of a football game or a prize fight. And to reform this, what can be done? So we need to choose an option which addresses or which talks about reforming this state of affairs. Option A, a shortening of the length of election campaigns to a period of 6 weeks. Option B, a stringent limit on campaign spending. Option C, a reduction in the television coverage of opinion polls during election campaigns. Option D, a limit on the length and number of political advertisements broadcast on television. So here the right answer is option C. The author is very categorically saying that there is too much coverage of opinion polls. So a good way to reduce that is to reduce television coverage of opinion polls, right? So that would directly address the issue raised in the text. Now, a shortening of the length of election campaigns to a period of 6 weeks in no way talks about television coverage of elections. And that is the issue the author has raised, that it's the television coverage that's a problem, not the length of the election campaigns. So it can't be option A. To cap campaign spending or to limit campaign spending is again going beyond the point of the text, which is about television coverage, so not option B. Okay, in option D, we are talking about the limit on the length and number of political advertisements broadcast on television. Now, what do political advertisements do? Political advertisements normally present the views of a particular candidate on different issues, right? So if you actually limit that, you're going against what the author wants. The author wants greater discussion of those issues. The author wants to hear from different candidates about what they think about the issues that are at play in a given election. And so limiting the number of political advertisements will not serve the purpose of this too much focus on opinion polls and who is winning, which is the issue that the author has raised. So option D also is not a good answer. Okay. Question 3. At an enormous research cost, a leading chemical company has developed a manufacturing process for converting wood fibers into plastic. According to the company, this new plastic can be used for, among other things, the hulls of small sailboats. Does the company not know that sailboat hulls are made of wood? Surely the mania for high technology can scarcely go further than this. Which of the following, if true, would most seriously weaken the author's conclusion? Okay, so what is the author saying here? That there's a leading chemical company which has developed a manufacturing process that converts wood fibers into a plastic, right? And then the company claims that this new plastic is ideal for use in small sailboats, for the hulls, right, of small sailboats. And then the author says, why have you created a plastic to use in sailboats when those hulls are themselves made of wood? So why not just use wood directly in the hull? Why use a plastic derived from wood? And the author criticizes this process as mania for high technology. So the author is looking at this as too much technology, where you are converting a raw material into a product and then using it for something where the raw material itself could be used. So that is the author's criticism. Now the question wants us to weaken that criticism. The question wants us to choose an option that would go against the author's claim. Okay, option A, the plastic produced by the process is considerably lighter, stronger, and more watertight than wood. B, the cost of the manufacturing process of the plastic increases the cost of producing a sailboat hull by 10 to 15%. C, much of the cost of the research that developed the new process will be written off for tax purposes by the chemical company. And D, the development of the new plastic is expected to help make the chemical company an important supplier of boat building materials. So the right answer for this is option A. The author's criticism of the process was that it was converting a raw material into something and then using that something for a sailboat when the raw material, that is wood, itself could be used in the sailboat. So if it is shown that the plastic which has been produced is better in quality, it is lighter, it is stronger, it is more water proof than wood, then obviously the technology has improved upon the raw material, which is wood, to produce a plastic. So that directly weakens the author's claim that there is today a mania for high technology where you're converting raw materials into chemicals, into plastics, without there being a need for it. So that need is clearly brought out in option A when we say that the plastic is in many ways better than the wood. And so this is a direct weakening of the author's argument. Option B, the cost of the manufacturing process of the plastic increases the cost of producing a sailboat by 10 to 15%. That actually does not weaken the argument. That strengthens the author's argument, because if you are going to make the sailboat manufacturing more expensive by using this plastic, then you're kind of saying that the author is right, that why produce a plastic when the original raw material would could directly be used for a cheaper cost. So it's not B. Much of the cost of the research that developed the new process will be written off for tax purposes by the chemical company. So that is fine. Whatever extra cost that the company had to bear to develop this new plastic will be written off. That's fine. But that is in no way addressing the criticism that the author has made, which is that you did not need to produce a plastic when the raw material wood itself can be used for sailboat hulls. So because it does not address that criticism, option C is not neither weakening nor strengthening that argument. So it's not C. And the development of the new plastic is expected to help make the chemical company an important supplier of boat building materials. Again, that is fine, that is fair, but it does not in any way weaken the author's conclusion. If anything, it shows that the company might benefit financially from this new plastic, but it does not address the question of the mania for high technology, this expression that the author has used. So whatever benefits the company accrues out of developing this new age plastic, those are completely separate from whether the plastic was needed in the first place. And that's the only thing that can weaken the author's claim, which option A is doing. So it's not option D. Question 4. Once I graduate and land a stable job, buying a home will almost certainly top my to-do list. Houses may cost more than they used to, but much of the reason they are hard to afford is due to a societal shift in spending priorities. Traveling and eating out are other expensive interests which have soared in importance in recent decades. Cut those out of a budget, and for many, a down payment wouldn't be out of reach. Which choice best states the function of the underlined sentence in the overall structure of the text? So here, the author is talking about the troubles with buying a house today the fact that it is now more expensive to buy a house. Houses cost more than they used to. But he says that's not the main problem. The problem is that our limited budget is now apportioned to other tasks as well, tasks like traveling and eating out. And because of that, because those tasks now eat up a major chunk of our budget, we are left with less money for a down payment to afford a house. So the main issue, author says, with house ownership is not the fact that houses themselves are expensive. It's the fact that we are now allocating more of our fixed budgets to other tasks. Now, if you look at the underlined sentence, traveling and eating out are other expensive interests which have soared in importance in recent decades. This sentence is giving you examples of activities that people are now increasingly doing, and activities which are now taking away more of the budget of households than they used to, which in turn is resulting in less ability to buy a house because less money remaining for a down payment. So what is this sentence doing? Option A, to summarize the reasons why house ownership has declined over the years. Option B, to present examples that illustrate the claim made in the previous sentence. Option C, to explain why budgetary constraints are to blame for low house ownership. Option D, to detail a rising trend in spending that the author supports. So here the right answer is option B. If you look at this sentence, it talks about traveling and eating out, which are examples that illustrate what the previous sentence said, that much of the reason house ownership is hard to afford is due to a societal shift in spending priorities. And that societal shift is explained by these examples. So option B captures the function of that sentence. Now, option A says to summarize the reasons why house ownership has declined over the years. One problem with this option is that there is no evidence in the text to suggest that house ownership has actually declined. The only thing we can conclude from the text is that house ownership is now more difficult because people have other priorities. But whether it has declined, we don't know. So this part is inaccurate. And so we cannot support this. The other reason that this is not a good option is this sentence is not a summary of the reasons house ownership is difficult, right? It's merely an illustration of some of the things that people are now spending money on. So option A is wrong. Option C, to explain why budgetary constraints are to blame for low house ownership. Again, this sentence doesn't do that. This sentence tells you the pressures on a household's budget, the tasks that put additional pressure on a household's budget, but it doesn't explain that budgetary constraints themselves, a problem with money itself, is responsible for poor house ownership, so it's not C. And option D, to detail a rising trend in spending that the author supports. So yes, this does indicate a rising trend in spending, but the author does not support that. In fact, in the very next line, the author says that if you cut these expenditures out of the budget, then you would have more money for a down payment. So D is also incorrect. The right answer is option